Hi, welcome to It's All in Your Head podcast. And today we're going to be talking about seasonal depression and kind of the state of the world and how that's relating to the season. We talked a little bit about what we want to do about the seasonal things that happen, the sadness and things that happens during this holiday season and things. And there's a really good book by Dr. David Burns, and it's called Feeling Great. He has his first book called Feeling Good that came out about 40 years ago that's still a bestseller. But he has
Wow.
another book out now called Feeling Great. And in this book, he talks a lot about finding the thoughts that keep us feeling bad and really doing your best to challenge those thoughts. And a good way to challenge them is to pretend that it's another person and that you're actually trying to talk back to that person. So let's say that I'm the person inside my head that's saying you're terrible, you're inadequate, you're an inadequate person, and here's why. And then you become the other person that says, well, yeah, I am inadequate, and at times I really am, and yet at other times this and this and this happens. And so we acknowledge our inadequacies at the same time we acknowledge our strengths. And so it's really about making sure that we acknowledge the fact that, yeah, we are inadequate at times. At the same time, we can't discount the positive sides of ourselves and the things that we do well. So it's not an all or nothing thing. It's not that I'm not inadequate at times, I am. And it's not that I'm unlovable at times, I am unlovable at times. And it's just that I also have this other side of myself where at times I'm lovable and I'm capable. And those things exist all at the same time in this same person. And I like to remember that I can be this person that has two sides to me. And I just do my best to keep the sides that are more positive on the forefront as much as possible, and that really that's the best that we can hope for in our human experience. And I love that about Dr. Burns, where he doesn't try to discount the fact that we have a negative side. We all have weaknesses. And I think that's a really important part for anybody out there who's listening to really recognize I do have weaknesses, all of us do. And yet I have these strengths too. And in focusing on my weaknesses, I'm discounting my strengths. And I wonder if maybe getting over some of our sadness and our depression and things would be to acknowledge that I have the weaknesses, but am I paying enough attention to the strengths too? What do you think about that, Tara?
I think that that's good. Another thing that I say to people, because most of the time, what people focus on are their inadequacies, is what you're saying,
Mhm.
or they focus on just total. I call them untruths that've been said to them about them, and they reinforce that kind of ticker tape running in the background that I'm not enough, or I'm this, or whatever those negative things are. And I always tell people, apply the truth to it or say just the opposite, period. And then tell yourself that and then focus on that. So instead of saying I'm not enough, I am enough. It can be that simple. I say I am the consummate reframer. I can reframe anything, is what I always tell people, because it's a skill that you have to learn, especially during tough times. And sometimes, as much as we want to have other people, that's just not our reality. So we've got to learn to do those things for ourselves, like, apply the truth to it. And then I say, for people who are people of faith or Christian people, if you don't know the truth about yourself, then you go to the word of God and apply that, because that's also truth. And so just making sure that you're, and things like I say, like infusing hope into your day, infusing hope into your life, all of those kinds of things that can keep us going and looking forward to tomorrow. Yes, it's unsure, but that doesn't mean that it has to be negative.
Mhm. I like that. Yeah. And so we talked about this a little bit, Tara, because recently I attended a conference where they were talking about how people can use positivity to take care of a lot of their depression. And I laughed a little bit because I wished that all it took was positivity, because you and I have talked about how you were able to overcome a lot of your issues without medication, but I was not. I've had to take medication. And I said, me without medication is not a pretty sight. And and they've even acknowledged in this conference that there are some who do have chemical imbalances and are not able to completely do it. And I've talked to my clients about this before too, and the difference being that if you are able to reframe your thoughts and it sticks, then you've done a good thing, or you're able to retrain your brain, and that retraining does happen and it sticks, then you don't need medication. If you aren't able to retrain your brain and it doesn't stick, or it takes exhausting amounts of energy, a little bit of medication can make your quality of life much better. And for me, that's definitely true. I think I would spend exhaustive amounts of energy and be able to be completely non-functional, without medication, because I wouldn't be able to keep my reframing thoughts, together. But I do know that still, even in spite of medication, that there's things that I have to do. I still have to do a lot of reframing of my thinking, because it's not a perfect solution, you know. And the thing is that I think that people can do this, that many people who are depressed can do this. And
Mhm.
I thought it was interesting that in talking about trauma, Dr. Burns was talking about the fact that 2/3 of people who experience horrendous things in their childhood actually become functioning adults without any help. It's
Mhm.
about a third of them that don't, and who
Mhm.
end up experiencing PTSD. And he said, what is the difference? Well, the difference had to do with the types of support that they found later on. Like, did they find good support? It could be that they found a very loving, supportive spouse that maybe helped them through a lot of their trauma and their triggers. They had a very patient, loving spouse. It could be that they got help early on, they sought counseling early on, different things like that. But also, it had a lot to do with the fact that how they framed the meaning that they found in the experiences that they had, like how
Absolutely.
they
Mhm.
found meaning in it and what they decided to do to carry it forward. So they had to have found some sort of meaning and purpose for their life in what they had experienced. What do you think
Mhm.
about that, Tara?
I think that that's true. And because in you talking about that, what it brought to mind, I used to teach a class called Neuroscience, Hope in the Human Spirit. As funny as it sounds, that was the title of the class. But what the premise was is that the brain has an incredible ability to heal itself through a process called neuroplasticity, which all of these things that we're talking about can help. But there's a textbook that we use in there called How God Changes Your Brain. Now, it had nothing to do with prayer or the actual changing, but the premise of the book was dealing with just having a thought or a concept of God changed the way people's brains reacted and changed the way people's brains were able to heal themselves, even if they chose not to believe in God. So, just that recognition of something outside of yourself gives you an opportunity to have that long lasting change and healing. So that's what you were talking about, that brought that to my mind, just dealing with that book. And if anyone ever wanted to read it, to me it's remarkable. A lot of it is sciencey, of course, but it was really remarkable just thinking about that, because they talked about just the fact that people would have the interchange, I believe in God, I don't believe in God, did something to change the way that the brain reacted. So that was just something to think about. But I also think about that there is, that's why I say I always can use the word. My favorite word, one of my favorite words is hope. Being able to have hope in anything changes your outcome. You know, even if you start to say, so I tell people, what can you hope for? Well, I hope I wake up tomorrow. Even though they think that's a negative, it's really not. Just change how you say it. You know, I hope I wake up tomorrow. Like, just anything like that. Give yourself, I believe in mantras. I tell people that all the time. I believe in buzzwords. All of those things that we can kind of say to ourselves to remind ourselves of where we want to be. Doesn't mean you're there right now, but where do you want to be? And what can you say to remind yourself of that? I say things like, this is not all it is to me. This is not all it is. There's definitely something different. There's definitely something better. And that's one of my buzzwords, better. There's a chapter in my book called Better. And it's just all speaking about that concept. So I could go on and on and on about that and change it. So what's next? I think the next current event, the next current event.
When you're talking about the belief in God or not the belief in God, one of the things that I felt was the most life-changing thing for me was actually a 12-step program. And I started teaching in a 12-step program, having not had a drug or alcohol problem myself. Because when I was growing up, there was so much addiction in my extended family that my parents themselves did not touch alcohol or drugs. And they taught us kids to stay completely away from it. And but when I became a drug and alcohol counselor, and I chose those internships because they paid, and I was a single mom, so I had to choose the internships that paid, right? So I get into this drug and alcohol treatment, and I said to the clinical director, I don't think I'm well qualified because I've never had a drug or alcohol addiction. And she said, she'd known me for a little bit at that point, and she said, well, you have addictions. And I said, I do. And she said, yeah, just think about it. And she said, I want you to put yourself through a 12-step program and use your addictions. And I said, I have addictions? And she said, think about it. And so I kind of thought and I thought and I thought, and I started to realize that I did. I was addicted to control. I had to control everything. I was addicted to feeling superior to other people, didn't realize it. I had addictive behaviors, you know. And she was right. And I had to sit down and think about, could I turn my life over to God? Could I turn my need to control everything over to something else, right? And just having to weigh that option of taking control of my life or turning it over to something that I claim to believe in, something bigger than myself, but I was not willing to turn my life over to it, right? Mm-hmm. That was too terrifying. But over time, I did become willing to let go of my need to control my life and to turn it over to something else. And it was powerful. And one of the things that I've really loved about a 12-step program is I've used it, exercises from a 12-step program in many areas of my therapy with other people. They don't know that it's a 12-step program they're going through, but we talk about it as if, is there any experiences you've had in your life where there's been something out there that you know, or something you know about yourself, or something you know about a habit or practice of yours, where you are able to get your needs met in ways that have been surprising or miraculous to you. And in asking that question, almost everybody has had experiences like that, where they've been able to get their needs met in miraculous ways, or some weird opportunity showed up just because they put the thought out there, or whatever it was. And so for them, that's kind of their experience of just what you're talking about. Does God exist or does it not? And even if they decide God doesn't exist, something exists for them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it does change their life, and it can be life-changing.
That's awesome. Thank you for joining us for It's All in Your Head podcast. Remember to subscribe, like, share, and please comment. Whatever mental health questions you have, we will be happy to answer them in future podcasts. So, current event number 2.
Okay.
The proposed COVID-19 vaccine.
Oh.
It seems to be, and I guess I don't know the word for it, because I don't want to call it a push, but I think that, well, I am going to call it a push. There's a push to have these conversations with everyone. I even got an email from our professional organization that was mentioning the vaccine. And I took it like they probably want us to query our clients. Mm. And so I've started to do that just to see what the thoughts are. And I've even asked different family members also, and I probably got one of the funniest answers that I'll share in a minute to that question. But what are your thoughts? What have you been thinking, if anything, about this? Well, I know you've been thinking about the vaccine. So,
Well, my personal thoughts are I don't see why not, because I've never had a vaccine have a reaction yet in my life. I mean, I had to take the shingles vaccine recently because I turned 60, and that one made one whole side of my body hurt for about a day. That was not pleasant. And I even had to take it a second time because it's a two-part vaccine. But I've never had a bad reaction to vaccines in the past. I don't know why I wouldn't take it. So I think that there's something, it's that whole climate of fear that we're in right now that makes people think that they shouldn't. However,
mhm.
when my clients bring it up, there's about half and half, that some say they will and some say that they won't. I think that in deciding that we won't, it's that idea. I think it's that we've all gotten into that habit of not doing anything for ourselves right now. At least that's what it feels like for me. I don't know. I don't know what it is. It's almost like it's almost like the I don't know. What are your thoughts on it, Tara?
And so my thoughts are very different. My thought is that I will not be taking it. And I think that where it comes up for me, I'm not sure. I've always had kind of reservations around vaccines and the whole kind of, I'm a huge conspiracy theorist. And then we also have history in our country is just honest that African American people have been experimented on. And so I've been finding in my mind many different ways to justify not taking it.
Oh,
And so I even got a call from her. She said, "Oh, well, I guess we won't be eligible for the vaccine." And I said, "Why?" Not that I was planning on taking it, but she was like, "Well, people with severe allergies or allergies to stuff, they said you shouldn't take it." So I just went, "Oh, okay, that's going to be my reason that I tell them I don't want it." But I wasn't planning on getting it in the first place. And
oh,
it was interesting because I heard I was watching a program, it was kind of a news program, I think, but they were talking about all the reservation. And one of the commentators or I think he was maybe one of the doctors discussing it, was a Caucasian man. And he said, well, I can understand why the African American community would have concerns because of the history. And he even cited some medical studies or experiments that have been done in the African American community that I did know about. The main one, of course, we all know about the Tuskegee Experiment, but there were some other ones that he even cited that he said, I can understand why the African American community would have reservations. And it
okay.
was just
I
like,
don't even know about this. What's the Tuskegee experiment? I don't even know about this.
yeah, see, so the Tuskegee Experiment, and you can look it up, it was an experiment where they actually injected syphilis into some African American people. And I think that the study was talking about how disease spread or something like that. But that's what they did. And these people did not know that they were being experimented on in that way.
Wow.
So I think that it's just different things like that that come up. And it's funny because my clients everyone that I've asked has said, I will not be taking it. I have one that said, if it's a condition of travel, I'll take it because I have to travel for work. But outside of that, I don't know why I would get it.
So
So,
now I wonder if mine, because see, I haven't bothered to notice if it was my African American clients that said no or my Caucasian clients that said no. I don't even, I guess I'd have to notice and ask in the future. I don't know.
right. I'd be interested to know. I'd be interested to know. And it's just like one of those things that we conversate about. But I would tell you the funniest answer. I have an aunt who's a nurse and she's retired. So, because I'm thinking, well, maybe, people who, older people are going to take it. Like, that's what I'm thinking. And I asked her what she thought. And I said, this was the funniest answer to me that I've gotten. And I was just like, what do you think about the vaccine? And then she said, I think anybody who takes it is going to turn into a zombie. And I just started to laugh because she was just like, yep, that's what I think. I think anyone who takes it is going to turn into a zombie. I said, oh, that's probably the funniest answer that I've heard. I don't know that we'll
Well,
be
they're
seeing
using it
zombies.
over in England already, and there's African American and African England people, what African English people over there. There's people of African descent in England already over there. So I guess we can wait and see how that works out for them.
Yeah. Yeah, or anybody. And I think she was referring though to anybody who takes it.
Oh,
So
okay.
I don't know. I don't know. And I guess I figure if enough people around me take it, then I'm covered. So, but I think too, there should be something. What came to mind, it's like there's certain things that people can't get. So, like the TB or the not vaccination, but the TB test, the TB skin test.
Yeah.
If you ever have a positive skin test, you're not ever supposed to have one again, and you're supposed to be able to just have a chest x-ray. I
Oh,
think that there should be some other alternatives that come up for people, because what happens if there are people who are, who need to be, who have issues with that would preclude them from being vaccinated, like an allergy or something like that. So I just think that some more research would have to be done on all of this stuff, on the serious side of it. But I usually say no. I don't take the flu vaccine anymore. I used to when I worked for the court, because I would be in contact with thousands and thousands of people a year. But
yeah.
I don't take it. I haven't taken that in years either. So I don't know. We'll see. I'm just wondering. We will definitely see what happens with that.
It'll be interesting to see how things move forward.
Mhm. And another thing I want to bring up, and this is a little more kind of, I guess, somber, but when we emerge from this, whatever that will look like, whether it's masked forever or whatever, we are going to be emerging into a world that has 300,000, just in our country, 300,000 at least less people.
Mhm.
And we just don't know what the impact of that is really going to be or going to look like.
Yeah.
And we don't know who's gone yet, if that makes sense. We don't know the people who I say I say have a passive impact on our lives. You know, that grocery store cashier who you were used to seeing all the time, who may not be there anymore, or that kind of thing. And I just think that we've got to start to prepare our minds in a different way than that, because I think even once everything opens up and we're all good and the numbers are going down and it plateaus and things seem to be better, I think that are some repercussions that we have not planned for yet, if that makes sense.
I'm
So,
sure that there are. One of the things that I was thinking about the other day is just the fact that after 9/11, 2001, instead of goodbye, everybody would start saying love you. And they did that because there was a sense that we never know when we would see our loved ones again. So everybody just started, love you became the new goodbye.
mhm,
Back in, the term bless you after someone sneezed has hung on for, centuries, because back when the Black Plague was around, if somebody sneezed, the chances were good that they were going to die of the plague. And so people would say bless you. And that has hung on as clear centuries later. We still say bless you when someone sneezes.
mhm,
So I don't know what will be, the new norm after. It could be that we touch each other more often. It could be that handshakes aren't enough. It could be that we hug each other upon greeting, no matter what the situation is. It could be that there's more hugs. It could be, you know what I mean?
mhm.
because I know that I personally have been completely starved for hugs,
Mhm.
and just have this urge to just hug anybody at this point in time if I'm allowed, you know?
Mhm.
And I don't know what will be the new norms from 2020, but there'll be something that changes inside of us that we've been deprived and starved of that we really want. So something will be different.
Definitely, man.
What do you think
Just
it'll
thinking
be?
about that. Thinking about that because I've had to just change the whole way that I do things. You know, I'm such a hugger. So especially seeing kids, they just kind of that's a kid's greeting when they see you or when they're leaving. And especially once they've established a relationship with you, kids just like they want to give you a hug. But that has been so different. And the limited people who I have seen in person, it's almost like they feel like it's something missing at the end. It's like we're done with our session, something's missing. And
Yeah,
that's what they were used to. They were used to that hug or something like that. And it's just very different. I'm interested to see what other kind of greetings will come up with. I know people have been touching elbows and you
yeah,
know they don't even really fist bump anymore. It's been
I
like, yeah, let's
know.
touch elbows. So, we'll see. I hear you. It's such a difference. I don't know. But I just think that it's prudent to advise people that it will be different and
Mhm.
that we can't, that's the only thing that we can expect is that it's going to look nothing like what we've ever been used to before.
Thank you for joining It's All in Your Head podcast. I just want to remind you to subscribe, like, share, and comment below. Thank you. And that's just it. And I'm, I don't know. There's so many businesses that went under, and restaurants and things like that that went under. Not so much in Georgia. I think we've been lucky in a sense that we didn't close everything down. You know, the way that, in fact, we got criticized. Georgia got criticized even by the president for not shutting down in that second wave. We stayed open. Restaurants stayed open. They just did table distancing and we did a lot of outdoor dining, which you can do
Mhm.
in Georgia almost year round, which is nice. But
Mhm.
because Serge and I have still gone out, and some of our favorite restaurants stayed open. A couple of them that we really like did delivery or
Okay.
curbside. You know, they stayed curbside, things like that. So some of our little mom and pop restaurants that we really love have stayed open. I know in New York and California, some of these little mom and pop places that people have loved for decades have gone under, things like that. And I hope these places can come back to life and become beloved places again that people love to visit and go to, because it would be so sad to lose some of those
Mhm.
places that are near and dear to us that we love as rituals to just go out and eat and have fun with our friends. And I know that we have a couple of new friends that we've met that we've wanted to go out and have dinner with. We haven't been able to. We want to get to know some of our new friends and things like that. And we would just love to be able to do those things. So I'm hoping that those things will still come about and we'll be able to do that. I know I introduced Serge to the guy whose office is right next to mine, and they go and because he knew I'd talked to Leonard quite a bit about Serge, and I finally one day I said, "Oh, Leonard, here's my husband Serge," and he goes, "Hey!" And both of them went to hug each other, and both of them went, "Oh!" And then they couldn't hug, and they'd gone to hug each other and had stopped themselves mid hug, and both of them kind of like, "Oh, I would have done that." And this is back in like April, or something, when we were still getting used to not touching each other.
Right.
But yeah, but I just hope that times will come back where we can have like these normal interactions with other people.
Mhm. It's funny because and there are some things that too are worth mentioning. We know that the numbers for domestic violence are up. It's been bad during this time, and suicide has also increased during this time.
Mhm.
Uh, so It's just if we want to add anything to prayer list, so to speak, it would be a couple of those things also. But it was interesting. I'd say my day job, so to speak, we were offering some supportive services to a family in need. And I went to pick up these groceries from our office manager. And I hadn't seen her face to face. I mean, we've had several Zoom meetings, but I hadn't seen her face to face in months. And it was almost like, oh my gosh, just the energy of seeing her in person, even though we had to stay distant and all of that, it was like we just wanted to stand in the parking lot and just stare at each other because we hadn't seen each other in so long. And she just kept saying, I miss you and I love you so much. And I kept saying, I miss you too. And it was just that whole thing. I could just feel that emotional presence of us just being able to be by each other. So it's like, man, I just know. So yeah, we have Zoom, nothing like face to face, but here we are, and some other advances that have happened. More people are, maybe people who would be more fearful of speaking to people or different things like that, including me, have been doing more things like this, having podcasts, meeting up with people, disseminating information in this virtual way. And it's been very refreshing. So this is a good thing. And we've seen some possibilities. We didn't know all this remote working was possible. We know it now. So for people who have really been able to thrive in this environment, it's going to be hard to get them to go back to an office. And you're going to have to make it make sense, why remote working is no longer going to be feasible. So, some good things have come out of 2020. It's been funny. I don't know if I'll ever be able to get that phrase talking about you 2020 that. I think that's going to have to stay a millennial thing. I haven't been able to figure that one out yet. But, just that, I mean, we still have hope. And reiterating, if you need help, reach out to people. Reach out. It's so important that you're able to do that. Isolation is not good, ever.
It isn't.
But right now we know that there's a place for it. So just keeping those things in mind also.
Yeah. Well, and I'd like to see when people are able to get out and able to do things again, what I'd like to see is that we become something different. And what I mean by that is I'd like to see that we become a society that connects more and puts down our phone and connects more with each other and talks more with each other. And instead of like even, I used to, when I would ride on airplanes before the days of cell phones and smartphones, people would talk to each other, strangers, and sometimes that was annoying, but oftentimes you got to know people. I sat next to a guy one time who told me all about an organization called the Arbinger Institute and a series of books that really changed my life. They were called The Anatomy of Peace and the let's see, it's called the Arbinger Institute. It's called The Anatomy of Peace is one book. And the other book is called The Deception of Leadership, Leadership and Self-Deception. Okay, so Leadership and Self-Deception was one. And the second book was called The Anatomy of Peace. And leadership and self-deception is about how, in order to be a good leader, you have to add in the human factor. That to be a good leader, you have to know and care about the people that you're leading. And that is how the only way to be an effective leader. And it's done in a story form. And it's actually a really good book. And then The Anatomy of Peace tells the story of a father who is in a rehab, going to a family session in rehab with his son and learning that he hasn't been a good father. He hasn't connected with his son, and he hasn't added the human element into his family. And so it's a beautiful, they're both really beautiful books. And this man told me about it because he works for the Arbinger Institute, and he goes around and gives these presentations to companies to teach leaders in companies how they can be better leaders by the human element by knowing the people that they lead, by asking about their personal lives and knowing about their personal lives and truly caring about who they are, not just leading as like a robot.